and longer for the first day of each month than for Sundays. And as each Sunday came round, I made it a day of rest, reading my Bible and giving thanks to God that He had been so merciful to me and made my solitary life so comfortable. A year had now passed, and every day I watched and prayed for some means of deliverance from this place, and then I began to think if it was not possible to make a canoe, such as Indians make out of the trunk of a tree. At last I selected a tree. 20 days was I hacking and hewing this tree, 14 in cutting off the limbs, and a month in shaping it like the bottom of a boat. When it was completed, I found it was so large that I was unable to get it to the water, and sadly gave up my undertaking. In the height of this work, I found I had lived 4 years upon the island. The next year passed very quietly, and although I was disappointed in my first canoe, I made a second one of much smaller size, but it was 2 years before I had finished it and got it to the water. I now resolved to make a tour of the island. I set out on the 6th of November, in the 7th year of my captivity. After a while, I brought my boat safe to a little cove, and laid down to take a welcome repose. When I awoke, I left the boat and made a trip into the island. I found plenty of delicious fruits, and brought many back with me. I saw many goats with their kids, and I conceived the idea of capturing them by making pitfalls and traps, baited with barley and rice. I knew that if I wanted to furnish myself with goat's flesh, the breeding them up, like a flock of sheep, about my hut was the only method I could take. On my return from my tour, I set some traps, and one morning I found in one of them an old he-goat, and in the other 1 male and 2 female kids. It was some time before they would feed, but after throwing them some sweet corn, they began to be tamer. I enclosed a piece of ground to keep them in, and in about a year and a half's time, I had a flock of 12 goats. I often gave them ears of barley, or a handful of rice, by which means they grew very tame. In 2 years more I had 43, beside what I had killed for my living. One day it happened that going to my boat, I saw the print of a man's naked foot on the shore. Had I seen a demon of the most frightful shape, I could not have been more confounded. I listened and cast my eyes around, but could hear nor see anything. I returned to my castle, frightened at every bush and tree, taking everything for men, and my mind filled with the wildest ideas. That night my eyes never closed. In the morning I ventured out of my hut and milked my goats, but I was constantly thinking of means to provide me with greater security. I even thought of pulling down my enclosures, turning my cattle wild into the woods, and digging up my cornfields that the enemy might not find them and learn that I lived upon the island. Some 15 months afterward, in the morning before it was light, there appeared from the seashore a flaming light about 2 miles from me, but upon my side of the island. I was struck with a terrible surprise, and went at once to my castle, and pulled the ladder after me. I loaded my muskets and pistols, and resolved to defend myself until my last breath. Anxious to see what was going on, I went to the top of a hill, and there saw 9 naked savages eating, as I supposed, human flesh, with 2 canoes hauled up, waiting for the tide to carry them off again. After they had gone, I went to the spot and saw the blood, bones, and parts of the flesh of the human bodies whom they had eaten. I was so fired with anger that I resolved to be revenged on the next who came there. The chance came about a year later, but instead of 2, there were 5 canoe loads, containing over 30 of the savages. Seeing so great a number, my heart sunk within me. I saw their horrible orgies, and I saw them drag 2 poor creatures from the boats. Soon one of them fell upon the ground, knocked down, as I supposed, with a club or wooden sword. The other poor creature looked around him with a wistful eye, but seeing himself a little at liberty, nature, as it were, inspired him with the hopes of life. He started from them and ran swiftly along the sands toward my castle. 2 of the savages pursued him, but he ran so nimbly that he gained on them every moment. As he drew near my castle, I seized my guns, and taking a short cut down the hill, threw myself between the fugitive and his pursuers, hallooing loudly and beckoning them to turn back, at the same time advancing on the 2 who followed him, and rushing on the foremost, I knocked him down with the stock of my gun. I was loath to fire, lest the rest should hear. The other savage, seeing his fellow fall, took his bow from his back, and was fixing his arrow to shoot me, when I was forced to fire and kill him. After I had killed the 2 savages, the one pursued was induced to come to me, but he did so with fear and trembling, and kneeled down and kissed the ground, and, placing my foot upon his head, gave me to understand that he was my slave. I took him up and made much of him in the best way I could. He was a handsome fellow, well made, with straight long limbs, and seemed about 26 years of age. This happened on Friday, and I gave him to understand that Friday would be his name, because it was upon that day I saved his life. Then I taught him to say Master, which I made him sensible was to be my name. I took him home with me and fed him. I also gave him a suit of clothes, such as I had made for myself from the skins of goats and other animals, and after a while I taught him to do all the kind of work that I had heretofore had to perform, not forgetting to instruct him in the Bible, and to cease all work on the Sabbath day. Friday proved himself a very sincere, loving, and faithful servant, and in a short time could understand nearly all that I said to him, and I began to love him, and spared no pains to instruct him. I too learned many things from him, not the least of which was boat building, for by his aid and judgment I was enabled to build and launch a large boat, which I styled my man of war, and which I designed to take me to land where Friday said there were white men living. One morning, while getting ready for this expedition, Friday came running into me, as though pursued for life, crying, "Oh, dear master! Oh, sorrow! Oh, sorrow! Bad! Oh, bad!" "Why, what's the matter, Friday?" said I. "Oh, yonder, yonder," said he, "be 1, 2, 3 canoes. 1, 2, 3. Surely, thought I, there must be 6, by my man's way of